Hello, in this video we're going to take a look at section 6.1 of the textbook, Graphing Points in the Cartesian Coordinate System. We're not going to be graphing lines in this video, just points. For a detailed description of how to graph lines, please make sure to check out the next video. To start with, the grid that you see in front of you on screen is a typical grid in the Cartesian Coordinate System. Cartesian Coordinate System is a bit of a fancy term for this type of graph that you see quite frequently actually. And this graph is really just a way of representing a relationship between two different kinds of variables. Most of the examples in this particular section are very abstract, and the two variables are just labeled x and y. But in reality, you see line graphs that we're going to be working with all the time in different contexts, and you'll have a discussion this week that asks you to make use of this type of graph, but in the context of a real-world setting. So let's take a look at how these work. First of all, I mentioned that this graph is used to represent a relationship between two different variables, and those are labeled y and x. The y-axis is referring to this vertical up and down line right here, and that's also known as the dependent variable. And the x-axis is called the independent variable, and it's talking about this horizontal line. You'll see these lines on the grids in your textbook and in Hawks. If you're just using graph paper, those won't come on the graph paper typically, and you'll have to draw them in. And they'll always be labeled with numbers. The two lines intersect in the middle right here, at this point right here in the middle. And that spot is known as the origin, and it's where both of the variables are set to 0. Moving to the right, the x-axis starts going up. First you have a 1 here, then a 2, then a 3, and some of the numbers are not written in on this particular grid, then a 4, and so on. And the numbers increase going to the right. Starting at the 0, you can also go to the left and you'll get negative numbers. The x values always increase positively to the right and decrease negatively to the left. Same thing with the y values. Going up, that first little tick mark is a 1, then a 2, then a 3, then a 4, and so on. And then going down from the origin, starting at 0 where the origin is, where that dot is, you have 1 that's negative, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, and so on, going down. And again, the y values, starting at 0 in the middle, will always go up positively and go down negatively. Another way to think about this, and one way that I like to think about this, it's almost like a little map of the city. You can think of the x-axis as Market Street and the y-axis as Broad Street. For those of you not from Philadelphia or not familiar with Center City, the main campus of Pierce is actually right around here. Oops, excuse me, right around here, 15th and Pine Street. And you can think about it as being at the intersection of 15th Street and of Pine Street. So to label where Pierce is, you'd have to use those two different descriptions. It's at the intersection of two streets. Similarly, when we're talking about points in the coordinate plane, you'll have to talk about them using two numbers, one for the x value, one for the y value. Typically the directions will tell you to list the ordered pair for each point. And the way that an ordered pair works is that the x value comes first and the y value comes second. Let's look at an example of that. The point A on the screen here, you can think about listing the coordinates for that point as telling someone, well, what are the x and y values associated with that point? Well, to find each of those values, I think about these grid lines almost as streets, and I say, okay, the A is right around there. Is 3 on the x-axis. So if I look straight down from the A, I see that it's lined up with 3 on the x-axis. So for point A, I know that my x value is 3. And then the y value, if I look to the side, it looks like it's 6. So I could say, oh, that's at the intersection of 3rd Street and 6th Street. So my y value is 6, and that is telling me exactly where that point is. You would typically write this as an ordered pair. An ordered pair, which it says right here, is just a pair of numbers in parentheses separated by a comma, and they always come in alphabetical order. The x value comes first and the y value is second. So I'd put the 3 first, put a comma, and then a 6 second, and it's just understood that that first number is telling you the x value of the point and the second number is telling you the y value. Let's try another one. The point B here, I want to write an ordered pair for point B. Well, taking a look at this, I want to identify what's the x value and what's the y value. So I look straight down to the x-axis from point B and see where that would fall on the x-axis. So going from that point and looking straight down, I identify, well, it looks like it's between the -4 and the -6. That would be a -5. And what about the y-axis? Where do you think that's going to be? Well, I'm going to look straight across to the y-axis, and it's at 2. So think about how you would write that as an ordered pair in parentheses in alphabetical order. Well, let's start with the x value, which is -5, and then I'd write the y value, which is 2. Another way to think about this is to think about telling someone a set of directions of how to get to point B from the origin, from the middle here. Well, I'd have to go 5 notches over to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So -5 because I'm going to the left. And then you have to go up 1, 2 more blocks from there, which is where that 2 comes from. Alright, one more. Point C there. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can come up with what you think is the ordered pair that corresponds to point C. Alright, did you get it? This one's a little bit tricky. Looking at your x value, how far over to the left or right is this? Well, this lines up with the origin, with that middle point. So I'm not going to the left or right at all. This is actually going to be at 0. My y value, I am going down 4, will be at -4. That's kind of a funny one, but you do see points that end up on the x and y axis sometimes, and that just means one of their coordinates is 0. Alright, what about going the other direction? We're going to be asked to graph some points given the ordered pair. Let's start with this point. Point A is -6, -2. I want to put a dot on this grid at the point that has an x value of -6 and a y value of -2. Remember, these always come in alphabetical order. X is always a left or right amount, and y is always an up or down amount. So if I want to take this point and plot that or graph that point, I'm going to think about moving in the x direction -6, starting from the origin, starting from the middle here. I'll go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's labeled. But I'm not done yet. I still have to go -2 in the y direction. Well, negative in the y direction is down, so I'll go down 1, 2. And there's my point A. And that's going to correspond to -6 in the x direction, -2 in the y direction. You can even look up and over just to make sure that those do line up properly. Again, another way to think about this is starting from the origin, trying to give someone a set of directions. So you've got to do both of those things. Go -6 in the x direction and -2 in the y direction. Alright, another point, 8, 1. Remember, the first one is an x horizontal left or right direction, and the second one is a y vertical up or down direction. Now, you might not have a piece of graph paper in front of you, but see if you can at least visualize or point on the screen where you think that that particular point's going to be. You can go ahead and pause the video if you want and try that out. Alright, do you think you know where that should be? Well, 8 is an x value, so I'm going to go 8 in the x direction, which is right here. I don't want to draw my point yet, though. That's just the x value. I still have to go 1 in the y direction. Since it's positive, I'm going to go up and not down 1. And that is where my point B would be. Last but not least, C, which is -3, 0. Again, x comes first and then y. And we know that 0 is kind of weird, so let's see how this works. First, I'm going to go -3 in the x direction, which is back 1, 2, 3, right here. And then y is 0, so I don't go up or down at all. That means that my point, C, is going to be right here. It's going to be on the axis. One thing when you're doing these is to make sure that you're not thinking about the squares at all. You're always thinking about the intersections as where points go. So they're going to go sort of on the little intersections like that. Never try to draw in the middle of a square if you have whole numbers. Those do come up occasionally when you have fractions to deal with, though. To summarize, the Cartesian coordinate system is a way of representing points graphically that represent two variables, an x and a y. X is always horizontal, left to right. Left is negative, right is positive. And y is always vertical, up and down. Up is positive, down is negative. Each point in the coordinate plane can be represented by an ordered pair. The first number in that pair of numbers in parentheses is always your x value. The second number is always your y value.